Oh, hey everybody. My name is Mary Kate Kwasnik, and I am a preservation specialist at NEDCC, also known as the Northeast Document Conservation Center. Thank you for joining me today to talk about how to celebrate with collections. Every single day, we are getting closer to 2026, which is the United States semi-quincentennial, or 250th birthday. That may be a big deal in your area, or it may not. So these tips should be evergreen for any celebration or any anniversary that your organization may be planning. So for those of you that are here, we have a big registration list, but a lot of folks might be watching the recording later. But if you're joining us live, please feel free to take a minute and introduce yourself in the chat. You can let us know your name, where you're zooming in from today, what organization you're representing. Just from the registrations that I saw, we have a big group, and I'm really excited to see how far and wide this group is coming from. So go ahead and let everyone know who you are and where you're coming from today. And I'll just give folks a minute to do that, and I'll read some out loud. Pennsylvania, Weymouth Public Libraries, Belfast, Northern Ireland, welcome. Oklahoma, Northampton, Massachusetts, Indiana, Boston, Massachusetts. Oh, now it's coming in really fast. I saw Toronto, Pennsylvania, Pensacola, Trinidad, welcome. Baltimore, Tacoma, Washington, New Hampshire, welcome. I'm in Maine, so not too far from you. Ontario, couple of Canadians. This is a very, folks are coming from lots of different countries in this webinar, so we won't be talking too heavily about the semi-quincentennial, but we will be mentioning it. So it should be applicable to everybody. So welcome, folks. I'm so happy to have you. Okay, so for anyone who is not familiar with NEDCC, we are the oldest regional conservation center in the United States, and we're located just north of Boston in Andover, Massachusetts. Our labs provide conservation treatments for paper-based materials, including books and photographs, as well as audio reformatting services, and we do lots and lots of digitization of paper-based materials as well. The Preservation Services Department, which I am part of, is the outreach and educational branch of NEDCC. We provide workshops and webinars like this one, and we travel all over the country for preservation assessments at all sorts of different collecting institutions. Here's an overview of what we will be covering today. We will be looking at common risks to display an exhibition, but also the benefits of bringing out your collections for the public. Then we'll move on to how to set yourself up for success with planning and policy. We'll look at digital alternatives for engagement, and then we'll look at a case study of the Alabama bicentennial. Then at the end, we'll bring it all together with some resources and a planning checklist that you can download and use after this. And then we'll work together to do a little bit of a brainstorming word cloud in a different tool, and then we'll end with some time for questions. I also want to highlight what we will not be covering. So this is not an event planning webinar, and we're not focusing on PR leading up to your celebration. Those are definitely important topics, and you can find fantastic resources on them. For example, the National Association of Commissions for Women put together a resource toolkit that deals with those topics ahead of the 100th anniversary of women's suffrage in 2020. So there's lots of stuff like that out there to help support you. Today, we're really focusing on how your collections come into play during anniversary celebrations and how to keep them safe while using them in exhibits and events. And an important note, I'm going to talk about all sorts of resources today, and everything that I mentioned, like that resource toolkit for women's suffrage, will all be part of a PDF resource guide that you can download from the NEDCC Training Hub. So you don't have to rush to look up things that I'm talking about because you will have all of that linked for you. So before we get started, I am going to go ahead and I'm going to turn off my camera so that I can focus on my slides, and then I'm going to turn it back on at the end for questions. Okay. So I will ask real quickly in the chat again, does anybody have an anniversary coming up that they are planning for? Something that has brought them here today. So maybe it is the semi-quincentennial, maybe it's not. Maybe it is a local anniversary, maybe it's your organization's anniversary. But I'll give folks just a minute to type in the chat if there's a specific reason why you're here today, something that you are planning for. Okay, so Holly says 150th anniversary of the institution. Amazing. Um, oh my goodness, so many coming in. Bicentennial of our seminary in 2029, Emily Dickinson's 200th birthday. So many exciting things coming up. Bicentennial of the city that we live in, university's 200th anniversary, 60th anniversary. Amazing. Okay, so there's lots of great reasons why you folks are here. And the tips that we're going to be talking about will be evergreen. So they don't all pertain to just the 250th, but they will. You can use it for that too. Okay, so thank you folks for sharing that. That is super helpful. So why are we all here today? As I'm sure you would all agree, anniversaries can be moments of celebration. They can allow us to reflect on people, works, and events that have had an impact on society and culture. For cultural heritage institutions, they often lead to an increased interest in and deeper engagement with our collections. Now, local anniversaries can happen all the time, and sometimes you'll find nationwide events that your local organization can tap into. So, I just mentioned the centennial anniversary of the ratification of the 19th Amendment back in 2020. That's an example of an anniversary where many individual states or towns prepared events and exhibitions that tied into a much larger national moment, and they made it their own. And of course, as a lot of folks noted in the chat, here in the United States, we're also entering a period of a lot of major anniversaries coming up. In 2026, we'll celebrate the 250th anniversary of American independence, and I'll talk about it a little bit more on the next slide. 2023 marked the 250th anniversary of the Boston Tea Party. And lots of towns and states that were early European colonies are actually nearing their 400th anniversaries of their founding. So, for example, Salem, Massachusetts will turn 400 next year in 2026. So we're nearing a lot of that here on the eastern side of the United States. And as I mentioned, many organizations also celebrate and curate exhibits around their own anniversaries. And a lot of folks mentioned this in the chat too. So in 2023, for example, that was NEDCC's 50th anniversary. So we did a lot of promotion around that. Lots of folks have stuff coming up, really, really big birthdays, as I saw in the chat. These can all be really powerful moments, and we want to ensure that we're celebrating them in ways that engage our audience members while also protecting our collections. So as I talked about, the US has a big anniversary coming up. So I mentioned, I know not everyone here is from the United States, so we're not going to focus specifically on 250, but rather celebrations in general. But I did want to talk about it because it is such a big deal coming up. So for those of you who are in the US, maybe you've been thinking about this and you've already been planning it. You might already be really sick of hearing about it. It's definitely been a really big theme at every conference that I've been to in the last year or two. And commemoration fatigue is a very real thing. So I get it. I just want to note that some states have really robust semi-quincentennial commissions with grant opportunities and programming opportunities lined up, and others just don't have as much happening. I would encourage you to do some digging on your state's semi-quincentennial website to see what kind of opportunities and resources are available to you. If there isn't a whole lot, that's okay. You can still plan your own programs and exhibits for the 250th or any anniversary or celebration that makes sense for your organization. And even if you're in an area that was not one of those first 13 colonies and did not become a state for many years, or you're not in the United States, there are lots of things to celebrate. If you are in the US, there are lots of ways to tap into the buzz around the 250th, but make it your own. Okay, so what are we worried about when it comes to anniversaries? What are the risks to our collections when we pull our treasures out of storage? Increase in research and media requests, events and exhibitions, and overall handling of collections during and in advance of our anniversary places these materials at risk for damage, theft, and even permanent loss of content. We're going to talk about a few of those risks more in depth. Many organizations will choose to celebrate an anniversary with an exhibition. This can be a wonderfully engaging way to tell a compelling story. The materials displayed have, almost by definition, super special value, but exhibition poses several preservation and conservation risks. For example, items must be handled to be prepared for exhibit. They have to be installed, deinstalled, and stored again, and this increased handling presents increased opportunities for damage and wear and tear. This is why time must be spent well before the exhibit even goes up, weighing your risks, evaluating the needs of the collection objects, identifying concerns, and mitigating issues. There has to be a balance between preservation and access. So let's look at some of those risks associated with display. These are what I would classify as the four most major risk areas that we want to be thinking about, and I'm going to go through each of them more in depth in just a moment. And again, none of this is to say that you should not exhibit items in your collection, but just that we want to be aware of the risks, how we might communicate them to other stakeholders involved in planning anniversary celebrations, and then mitigate that risk going into plans to exhibit our collections. Light. So light is one of the biggest risks to collection items on view. All light is damaging, and light damage is cumulative and it is irreversible. Light damage can be as basic as the lightening of a book spine or binding seen in the image on the left, or in extreme case, as seen in the Mark Rothko murals at Harvard, which we see on the image on the right. They were on display from 1964 to 1979 in an area with constant exposure to sunlight, and they were so damaged that they were packed away for 35 years to protect them. Aside from fading, there may be damage to the physical and chemical structure of materials. Intensity and long exposure times can lead to fading or changing colors in dyes or colorants. Ultraviolet radiation will lead to weakening, bleaching, and yellowing of paper and other organic materials. All of these changes can diminish readability, affect the aesthetic appreciation of artwork, and impact access to the information they contain. And if you'd like to read more about the Mark Rothko mural situation, there are links in that resource guide from the Training Hub where you can read about that. Chemical damage is another risk when we're pulling collection items out of storage. Materials are often framed prior to display or put in exhibition cases, and acidic matting or other non-chemically inert chemicals and materials can interact with the original materials to cause serious chemical damage. You can see examples of this type of damage here in the image. So around the edges, you can note the speckled foxing, which is under the mat and the frame. And then closer to the image itself, we see mat burn around the image from the acid in that mat. Can also happen in exhibit cases that weren't designed to exhibit archival materials. I visited historical societies that use really cool refurbished cigar cases and jewelry cases to exhibit materials, which is really creative, but those materials often have glass that lets in UV and fluorescent light rays. They often have wood varnish that can off-gas harmful pollutants, onto the materials. So that's not to say that you shouldn't use those types of things and repurpose what you have, but there are different ways that you can mitigate that risk, like lining the wood with archival mat board and just helping to limit the risk of that chemical damage happening. Research, handling, and exhibition all bring the next risk. While there are certain broad environmental causes of damage, we ourselves may also inadvertently cause problems through use and handling of our collections, which results in mechanical damage. Examples of this are things like pinning of original photographs, like we see in this image on the left, having excessive weight or widths in book bindings, or even like overstuffing archival boxes. We can sometimes see broken book spines from improper support, like not displaying books in a book cradle or opening them too wide. We can have folded over corners of pages, kind of like dog earring pages, or we can have rolled and fold items, which leads to warping and tears like we see in that bottom image of those photographs. Finally, while not as frequent as the display, chemical, and mechanical risks we discussed, theft and vandalism are also risks associated with access. So the image you see on the left is from the very famous theft at the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum in 1990, where 13 high-value works were stolen and have still never been recovered. Security is always a risk for items on view. And if you're curious about this, the Gardner Museum has a really interesting narrative about this on their website. Vandalism is another related security threat. So here on the right, you see a Monet that has literally been punched through at the National Gallery of Ireland. The point is that access and display, while important, are inherently risky for collections. The decision to exhibit or allow increased access to materials requires a weighing of these risks and taking steps to mitigate potential issues. Policies around display, handling, and access are the underpinning of keeping your collection safe. Exhibition can be a form of providing access, but access can also be achieved through other means, which is why I'm mentioning it specifically here. Access is often very mission based and something that both administrators and granting agencies get really excited about. But it's important to remember that preservation and access are inseparable. If it hasn't been preserved to last, then you can't use it. Remember that preservation is a set of ongoing activities that extend the life expectancy of your collections. And in turn, that ensures the long term access of these materials. It's really common to experience an increase in access requests leading up to that big anniversary. It can take on a variety of different forms, including researchers or members of the press requesting to view materials in person or asking for digital images of collections materials. Exhibitions themselves are also really access oriented. And all of these things can lead to an increase in viewing and handling of the collections, which of course means that there are risks involved. In general, an item that is in high demand and needs constant access may be a higher preservation priority than an item that no one is trying to access. So, leading up to an anniversary, you really want to think about what materials curators and patrons will be most interested in, and then spend your time and resources ensuring that these collections can be safely used, whether that means implementing more preventative preservation activities like rehousing or staff training, or even seeking conservation work before putting something like that on exhibit. And of course, it is not all doom and gloom. There are many benefits to utilizing your collections during an anniversary or celebration. Benefits of celebrations may seem obvious to us, but they include building advocacy among stakeholders, which can help with community building. It can open up grant and fundraising opportunities, which can then in turn help to fund conservation and preservation work. It also leads to greater visibility for collections, which contribute to a more inclusive historical narrative. It really gives you an opportunity to get your story out there. Anniversaries can also be a wonderful opportunity for collaborating with neighboring institutions. You may find that collaborating reduces the workload and it provides an opportunity to link the stories that you're telling to other institutions who have different collections, different perspectives, etc. There are lots of great examples out there and great work being done in terms of collaborative community projects around anniversaries, but I did pick one to share with you today. In addition to all of the anniversary examples I mentioned earlier in the webinar, 2023 also marked the 50th anniversary of hip hop. This was an anniversary that was being celebrated by lots of organizations all across the country. And I want to highlight here as an example the work that was done by the St. Louis Art Museum that created a series of local collaborations. So here on the right, we see an image of their graffiti mural residency. As well, they also partnered with the Baltimore Museum of Art on an exhibit called The Culture. So they used that big anniversary to tap into other community organizations near and far to really co-promote, to collaborate, and build on that existing buzz. There is also a real opportunity around anniversaries to share more inclusive narratives. For example, ahead of the 250th, the DAR has created some great online exhibits and initiatives around underrepresented groups who were involved in the American Revolution. So in the image on the left, that is a screen grab from one of their digital exhibits called Remembrance of Noble Actions. There are a lot of great resources regarding collaborations between cultural institutions and their audiences. We recommend Nina Simon's work, The Participatory Museum, and The Art Relevance as great places to start. And they're available to read online and apply to more than just museums. They are both linked in that resource guide that has been uploaded to the NEDCC Training Hub. Later on, we're going to look at a case study that has really capitalized on a lot of these benefits. Anniversaries also provide an opportunity to assess and care for your collections. This may include conservation treatment for works you wish to display, items you anticipate increased research interest in, or materials that support your celebration in other ways. The excitement generated by the anniversary can make it an opportune moment to raise funds for these conservation needs from individual donors, granting organizations, or even creative community-based funding. This year, for example, NEDCC has done a lot of conservation work on 3 different copies for 3 different institutions of Phyllis Wheatley's poems, which was published 250 years ago last year. It's important to note, unless you're a trained conservator, the only cleaning and repair that you should be doing is super gentle surface cleaning, just like really basic dusting with a soft brush or a dry cleaning sponge. And NEDCC has a leaflet on this topic that was updated recently. You never want to apply any liquid or chemicals to your photographs. Leave that work to a trained conservator. If you have a damaged or dirty item, you can contact a conservator and they will inspect the piece and write you a proposal for treatment. If you're thinking about working with a conservator and have questions about the process, you can check out NEDCC's leaflet on the topic, which is linked in this slide and also in the resource guide. And you can also feel free to reach out to us by email and we can put you in touch with the right folks. Okay. So, create these events so that we reap the benefits with fewer of the risks. For starters, planning needs to start far in advance. In many cases, you should be thinking years, not months or weeks in advance. This planning shouldn't focus exclusively on event planning, although obviously that is super important too. It should also focus on developing the supporting policies and procedures that will allow you to host a successful anniversary and protect your collections. Ideally, you would have all of these policies and procedures in place already. However, if you don't have a mission statement or collection development policy, an upcoming anniversary serves as a great focusing force to prompt this work. If you do have those policies and procedures in place, an anniversary is also a great reminder to reconsider revisions and updates. Your institution's policies will support a successful celebration. If you don't have some of the basic supporting policies that we're going to discuss, put them in place. Work on developing them, receiving administrative approval, and implementing them way before your anniversary arrives. If you do have them in place, go ahead and review them and update them as needed. Developing these provides another opportunity to collaborate with neighboring institutions. You may find that developing these policies together reduces the workload, and you can find sample policies and templates online to help you get started. One of the first things that we want you to develop or renew is your institution's mission statement. A mission statement is really an umbrella statement that's meant to lay out the overall goals and objectives for your institution. Excluding or ignoring the mission of the parent institution can lead to confusion and conflicting direction. So you want to be sure that a smaller unit's mission really fits in with and serves the overall mission. So if you work in a certain collection of a museum, your collection should have its own mission statement that supports the larger statement, but is also a little bit more specific to your collection. If the mission is for a collecting institution or unit, it really needs to reference preservation. The American Alliance of Museums provides further information on the guiding principles and a sample mission statement at the link in this slide, which is also in the reference guide. A lot of collecting organizations do have a mission statement, but they don't have a collecting policy. And a collecting policy is so important to have. Your collection development policy should indicate the scope and depth of your collections. This is crucial leading up to an anniversary. You may experience a dramatic increase in offered donations leading up to that anniversary, and you'll need to have a policy in place that outlines what you will and will not collect. This is really important for successful stewardship of collections. A good collection development policy enables repositories to make wiser use of limited resources by bringing collecting in line with resources available for preservation, storage, and use. If you're an archivist, you might recognize that. That is a quote from Gerald Ham, who was a real mover and shaker in SAA, the Society of American Archivists. For guidance on your own collection development policy, look outside to other collecting institutions in your region. Try to avoid extensive overlapping collections, and you may want to avoid competing. For example, ideally, a local library and historical society will have complementary collecting scopes rather than being in competition with one another. Okay, I'm going to pause here, just take a sip of water. Having intellectual control over your collections is super critical. If you don't know what you have and where it is, you can't care for it and you can't provide access to it, even if it is incredibly relevant for your anniversary. You also won't know if something has gone missing. We touched a little bit on the risk of theft and loss, and intellectual control is really important for mitigating this risk. If you know that this is a weak spot for your institution, and it is for a lot of places, consider conducting an inventory of your collections, either the full collections or even just starting with the sections most relevant to your upcoming anniversary. And if you've never done this before, the National Park Service Handbook has a chapter describing the process, which is in the resource guide. Good intellectual control also starts at the time of accession. You may experience an increase in donations leading up to your anniversary. You want to make sure you have a really solid deed of gift today. The deed of gift transfers ownership of and legal rights to the donated materials, and it requires certain specific elements. The Society of American Archivists, a guide to deeds of gift, is a useful resource for creating your own, and we have a link to that on this slide and in the resource guide. And it also doesn't hurt to look at kind of like peers in the field. Look at an institution that's really similar to yours, like a similar size, similar collecting scope, and look at their deeds of gifts and see what they include. As exhibitions are often a major part of anniversary celebrations, we're going to look at exhibit policies a little bit more in depth. Here on the screen, you can see some specific areas that you may want to address in one or several policy documents. This is up to you, and it may be determined by the size and mission of your organization. It should also be noted that many of these policy areas overlap with those related to collections management and emergency preparedness. So you may be able to pull information from existing documentation as you work towards a more comprehensive exhibition policy, if those exist. If not, this is a good time for me to plug the importance of written policies when it comes to holistic or total collections care. All of your policies should work together to really protect your collections and outline what it is that you do. So some questions that you might want to ask when creating or reviewing an exhibit policy include, how long do exhibits stay up? Or in particular, how long will this one stay up? Who selects the materials being exhibited? If conservation treatment is needed before and after the exhibit, who is responsible for that, especially financially? What is an acceptable environment for exhibiting loaned materials? And do you have that acceptable environment? What type of security is available to protect items? Are there specifications for label design, for case layout? And what is your policy on loaning materials to other institutions? Policy is especially important when borrowing or lending, since it sets expectations on both ends of the agreement. While you'll likely be focusing on items within your own collection, you may need to borrow objects from a neighboring institution to strengthen your exhibition. In that case, be ready to supply the following to an institution that owns the item in question. They will want to know your institution, the point of contact, the title, location, dates of exhibit, the detailed items that are going to be borrowed, including their, identifying numbers, whether it's a call number or an item number, the specifics of the item. So specifically how it will be shown, what page it will be opened if it's, a bound item. A full facilities report and details about that exhibit space and environmental standards, as well as insurance coverage for the item on loan. And then any information about published catalogs, web versions, or other associated publicity. And of course, there may be other considerations that are specific to the institutions that you might be dealing with, which are not listed here. On the flip side, if you anticipate requests to borrow your materials, you want to be able to provide the requester with all of these things on the slide. So any costs associated with the loan, a condition report for the item before it goes out, any conservation work prior to the loan, specific environmental standards that you want them to maintain in their exhibit space, any specific security requirements, and then any specific book cradles or supports or mounts that are important for that item, or what they need to do to take care of it if they're going to create that. And then any logistics for the item to travel to and from the collection space. Remember that you know your collections best and what is safe for them. And hopefully you have your exhibition policies in place already to help you justify decisions to loan or not to loan. And you really want to be thinking too, if you are loaning items out, what is the value of the item to your institution and what would loss or damage mean to your institution? Condition reporting, which we mentioned on the 2 prior slides, should be a routine part of collections care, but it's especially important in support of exhibitions or other periods of increased handling. As part of your loan decision and during the entirety of the exhibition process, make condition reporting part of the routine to ensure that the object is safe. So you'll want to inspect all parts of the item before display and note any existing problems with its physical appearance and condition. That examination should continue during exhibit, and this will help to catch issues early. After the exhibit, you'll want to ask these questions. Does the object need conservation work? Can it be exhibited again, or does it really need to go in long-term storage? And is there a better method for display? You also want to be sure to document all of this information. Written documentation is great, but if you can also add photo documentation, that is even better. Okay. Now we'll go over some general guidelines for how to handle your collections, both for research and also for scanning. These are rules that you should share with your staff, your volunteers, and your researchers so that they're knowledgeable about all possible risks and how to avoid them. The good news is that with a little bit of organization and forethought, we can do a lot to prevent or minimize mechanical damage through good storage and handling practices. So let's start with the big one. We are all familiar with white cotton gloves that used to be super common in libraries and museums, but these are no longer the standard recommendation. Cotton gloves are not as sensitive when it comes to our tactile sensitivity, and they're not as clean as we need them to be. Instead, we recommend that you use nitrile or latex gloves. You can just throw them out when you're done. And you really don't even need to wear gloves with historic documents or books. Just having clean, dry hands is perfectly acceptable. But for photographs and certain objects like metal, you want to protect your collections from any oils, salt, and dirt that might be on your hands. So those are really good materials to be using gloves with. And of course, make sure that you are always using appropriate, stable supplies with your collection. Label in pencil, not in pen, or you can use an archivally safe marker. You can buy blue photo pencils that are great for labeling prints. And again, you always want to make sure to look for the symbol of the AP, which stands for Photographic Activity Test, when ordering any archival supplies and tools. Supporting your bound volumes, use book cushions like the ones pictured here in the top right. They are foam wedges made of preservation quality foam. they're cheap, easy ways to support the spine and covers of books when you have them open, either for exhibition or just for use. And if you're in a pinch, you can even just take a clean cotton towel and roll it up and stick it underneath each cover to support it while you're looking at the item. But you really want to be supporting it from all sides. And then also shown here in the bottom right is possibly something I think is a little bit more unusual to see. These are book snakes. They're the little thin pieces on either side of the pages. They're thin lead-filled pieces of fabric that really super gently hold pages down while a book is being used or while it's on display. Before we get to handling our collections, we also just need to be prepared. So start with yourself. You want to have those clean, dry hands that we just talked about. You do not want to have just put on any lotion or hand sanitizer. Just wash your hands and dry them thoroughly. You want to avoid using nail polish on days when you're going to be touching your collection items because it can mark your collection items. You'll want to tuck in any baggy shirts, ties, scarves, jewelry, and pull your hair back. Basically, we recommend when you're going to be handling archival material, you can pretend you're about to operate some heavy machinery and prepare yourself accordingly. Excuse me. Once you are prepared, you can get your workspace set up. Now, it doesn't matter if you're just handling a book or an object briefly, you need to have a large flat space available that is clean and empty. Some of our items may be very large and heavy, so before you pick anything up, know if you need a partner to help you lift it, and know where you're going to set it down before you pick it up. Always visually inspect an object before handling it. You want to look for any weak points and remove any lids or loose elements that could fall. And then make sure to clear the path between your storage and your workspace. So open any doors that are between you, move anything that's in the way, whether it's a book truck or a cord or a chair leg. Make sure that you have a clear path. And it might be helpful to have some basic policies or guidelines for handling. If you have someone come in to look at a ledger or some old deeds, you have something on paper that you can share with them as safe handling tips. This is also really helpful to publish on your website when people are looking into how to visit you. You can also use a tray or a cart to transport oversized, heavy, or awkward items from your storage to work area so that you're not just relying on your arms. Always handle materials slowly and with care. With books, use your whole hand to carry the page, and as you turn it, support the page as well as the binding. This also gives you a chance to feel what's on the page, how heavy it is, so you're really prepared if something big is going to drag down the page. If you feel like that page is unusually heavy, give it a peek under the page before fully turning it to make sure that you're supporting in all of the right areas. With books, really take a look at the condition of the binding. How much do you need to open it to see the pages? Do you need to use multiple book wedges to get to the angle you need? Book sofas and wedges like these come in a variety and styles of shapes. And you can order whatever type you need as long as they're made of preservation quality materials, so chemically inert materials. And then we wanted to talk a little bit about scanning and digitization. Anniversary celebrations can often involve some type of digitization or online component that seeks to make items of your collection more widely accessible. And there's lots of things to be careful about when you're doing any scanning. But remember that you want to avoid crushing book spines or any three-dimensional aspect of an object when you're scanning. Flatbed scanners, which a lot of organizations have, are really specialty tools best reserved for certain types of flat, stable media like photographic prints and flat documents. So just as an example, I worked in a special collection that used flatbed scanners for all of our basic digitization requests. And it worked super well for photographs and newsletters and documents. But one time somebody asked me to use it to scan an oversized bound book of Sanborn fire insurance maps. And I had to say no and find another way to take a photo of it and email that to him. Because putting that bound oversized volume on a flatbed scanner just wasn't safe for the item. But if you are focusing on photographic prints and flat documents, then a flatbed scanner can be a great option. They're fairly affordable, they're usually a couple $100s, and they're really user friendly and can even be used for slide scanning with the addition of a slide holder. There's lots of accessories available for these. Other materials like 3D objects or rare books can be really super easily imaged with a camera setup and using book cradles or object stands. Imaging projects for weak, damaged, or super oversized materials may be best accomplished by enlisting the help of a vendor. And this may be something that you need to budget for if it's a really big part of your anniversary. After all of this, you might decide that certain key items in your collection are just too fragile to be safely exhibited, or you might be thinking of ways to increase the visibility of the exhibit that you're planning. So, thankfully, there's lots of resources and opportunities to promote access engagement with your collections online. Especially after the pandemic, probably more so than ever, there are great resources that can help you create virtual exhibits or other related methods of digital engagement. But with limited time and resources, you may want to really think about if you have the resources necessary to create a virtual exhibit. You can see some pros and cons on this slide here. Pros, not only is this a great way to expand accessibility and really expand the reach of your audience, it can be safer for fragile collections, and it's a really interactive medium. But cons, it can be super expensive, whether you're doing it in-house or with a vendor. It's going to cost you. If you're doing it in-house, it can be really time intensive, and time is a resource. It also requires your intended audience to have access to a computer or a device or Wi-Fi, and that may not be your audience. It really depends, and you know your audience best. So you'll want to weigh all of these pros and cons. And then these are some examples of resources that you might want to use to promote digital engagement with your collection for your anniversary. And these are all linked, so if you download these slides, you can look into them. You might already be familiar with Google Arts and Culture. The Met used this for their recent anniversary online exhibit. There's other tools like Omeka and Content DM, which are great and have different strengths and weaknesses. And you are welcome to look into those. Matterport is a little bit different. It allows you to create interactive 3D like tours of your physical exhibit or maybe your historic home. But then there's also opportunities to look more closely at your state or your local area for digital projects and potential partnerships. So, for example, Digital Commonwealth is a Massachusetts project that hosts lots of digital collections for collecting institutions, and your area may very well have something similar. Now, let's take some of the principles that we've just covered and look at what they look like in action by turning to a case study on the Alabama bicentennial. So, from about early 2018 through the start of 2019, NEDCC worked on conserving the state of Alabama's 6 constitutions. This work was undertaken as part of the state's bicentennial celebration and was literally years in the making. So, we've talked about the importance of community involvement and advocacy from stakeholders and partners. So, this project had support not only from the Alabama Department of Archives and History, but also from the Alabama legislature, who established a special bicentennial committee in preparation for the exhibit, or for the celebration, excuse me. There was also an incredible amount of preparation from the Alabama Department of Archives and History, which prepared educational resources for the public and several exhibitions leading up to the opening of their touring exhibition, We the People, Alabama's Defining Documents. Webinar, I want to highlight some of the key pieces of the story of this project because they demonstrate how important planning and preparation is for these events and how successful it can be. The 4 constitutions measured between 20 and 43 feet long, so they were unrolled, examined, and worked on in sections. There were issues like seam failure and degradation of the ribbons holding the constitutions together, and they all needed treatment. On the image on the right, you can actually see the flaking of iron gall ink on Alabama's Ordinance of Secession. Iron gall is notoriously unstable, and flaking like this can eventually lead to a loss of text. After thoroughly examining the documents, our conservators consulted with the archive staff to develop a treatment plan that would stabilize the constitutions and allow for their exhibition during the bicentennial while still supporting their long-term preservation. A variety of treatments were applied. On the left is an image of a conservator applying a dilute solution of conservation-grade gelatin to areas of flaking ink. This acts as like a binder and it allows the conservator to consolidate the damaged text. And this is just one aspect of treatment. They also digitized all of these items, which you can see on the right-hand side. Ultimately, it was a super successful exhibition and celebration. We the People opened at the Huntsville Museum of Art. Then it traveled to the Museum of Alabama at the Department of Archives and History. And the digitized versions created at NEDCC were all available to view online as well. In total, the bicentennial celebration allowed the Alabama Department of Archives and History to conserve and exhibit some of its most precious documents, as well as engage citizens from all of their counties visiting throughout the state, and it really promoted meaningful conversations, about the history and future of the state, and generated a ton of press coverage. So they did a really fantastic job with this project. Okay, resources and checklists. So we're nearing the end of our webinar, and here are some suggestions for resources that may come in handy as you're thinking about all of this work and thinking about how to fund it. And this is primarily for folks who live in the United States. A lot of federal semi-quincentennial grants have already closed their application periods, but there are other federal and state grants that could help with preservation needs. There's been a ton of confusion in the last year over which federal grants will be opening again this year. But so far, quite a few preservation-related grants from the National Endowment for Humanities actually have been reposted and have anticipated dates for their applications to be released in 2025. So the Preservation Assistant Grant, this is one that a lot of our clients use. It's projected to be re-released this October and has an anticipated deadline of January 8th, 2026. And then similarly, NEH's Sustaining Cultural Heritage Collections, which is a much larger grant, is projected to be released with an anticipated due date of January 9th. Also worth checking out what your state, or even more locally, your county or town has in terms of funding opportunities. So for example, I live in Maine, and my state is just now discussing local grants to organizations for 250th programming. So we're starting to see some of that trickle down funding for 250th stuff. So now is still a good time to get a piece of it. And then at the bottom, you'll see some other resources that NEDCC offers. We have a really robust funding opportunities page that our marketing manager keeps updated. So definitely check that out. And then here is a checklist. I'm not going to go super in depth with each one. The point is that you can download this and use it in your planning. We also have this available as a PDF in the NEDCC Training Hub. On this slide, part 1, we can see that it's an overview of the policies that you should have or think about updating. This ties in really well with the staff and volunteer training refreshers because policies and procedures are most helpful if staff are trained in how to use them. And then part 2, these are some steps you should take with respect to intellectual control. And that includes things like conducting an inventory, processing, creating documentation, etc. Part 3 are tasks specifically related to prepping for an exhibit, but they do overlap with some of the earlier checklist categories to include some relevant policy elements and staff training. And then finally, additional points around access and handling in order to ensure that your collections can be safely accessed by researchers and patrons. So I know I just zoomed through that because I want you folks to download it and use it on your own, but that is there available to you, whether you want to take it from the slides or the PDF that is in the NEDCC Training Hub. Okay, so now that we've looked through that checklist and the funding resources, the checklist gives you a framework for starting the planning process. I wanted to give us a little bit of time for some collaborative brainstorming so that you leave the webinar today with some additional energy and some ideas for next steps. So the questions I'm about to ask you in a different tool are also available as a Word doc worksheet in that NEDCC Training Hub. So you can download it and fill it out on your own after this webinar. But first, I wanted to bring us to a different tool where we can share some of these thoughts on one page together so that we can learn from each other and maybe fill in some gaps that you might have. So you can go ahead and open a window in Chrome or Firefox and go to menti.com and then enter the code 42375146. I'm also going to put the link in the chat, menti.com, code 42375146. Or if you would like to do this on your phone, you can do it on your phone. And then I am going to switch. Oh, people are already in there. That's fantastic. So it is going to bring you to a screen with a couple different fields. And I'm going to ask you some questions and you can put in whatever you're thinking. So, whoops. Okay, here we go. So my question here, folks are coming. There's 9 people in there. I'll give folks just a minute to get back to Menti. Okay, let me repeat the code. 4237 space 5146. Okay, try that one. I might have typed in incorrectly. Or I will go back my PowerPoint slide and you can scan the QR code. Okay, thank you for letting me know. The newer one for us, okay, 861877178. Thank you, Gabrielle. Try that one, folks. Or you can scan the QR code. Okay, awesome. Thank you so much. Sorry about that. There's always something that goes wrong. I'll go back. Okay, now a bunch of people are in here. Fantastic. So my question here is, what outcomes are you hoping to achieve in using your collection to celebrate? And if you are not familiar with word clouds, the more people who say the same word, the larger the word will be. So here I'm seeing that people are really looking forward to collaboration, engagement, outreach, education. This is awesome. Very cool. I'm going to give it like one more minute. And after this webinar, just so you folks know, I'm going to download these as PDFs and I'm going to put them in the NEDCC Training Hub. I'll do that this afternoon so that you can download them too in case you want to use them in your brainstorming. I'm also seeing visibility, getting a little bit bigger impact. That is very cool. I love that. Okay, I'm going to go to the next one. There are 4 in total. Okay, so number 2, what is your biggest challenge in planning to use your collection to celebrate an upcoming anniversary? And again, you can answer all 3 fields. You could answer one, whatever makes sense for you. But specifically, you can think about one that you really want to tackle, and we will see what people. I think that's cooperation. Staffing, totally. Funding, absolutely. Accessibility, I'm seeing staffing and funding getting really big. Absolutely, those are such big problems. A lot of the clients that we work with for our preservation assessments have maybe 1 staff person, maybe no staff, maybe just a really energetic volunteer board. And funding is always a problem. Space, absolutely. Politics, totally. Always, but you know, especially now. Space, politics, staffing, funding. It's so interesting to see what is coming up for people. And lots of smaller words too, because everybody is so different. Every organization has its own special cases. Okay, I'm going to go on to the next one. What tools or resources do you have at your disposal? So who at your organization or in your network can help you with this project? So it doesn't have to be a person. This could be like, maybe you have a really beautiful exhibit space, but you don't have the staff to build exhibits. Maybe you have a really fantastic facilities person who can really help you drill down on your environmental control issues. Or maybe you have something in your collection that is like such a treasure and you know that people are going to be coming to you. Interns, that is awesome. A great local committee, volunteers. Volunteers are so important. Public engagement staff, that is so important for anniversaries. Conservation staff, that is awesome. Enthusiastic curators, that's fantastic. Interns and volunteers are still really big here. That is great. Volunteers are so important, but it's also a lot of work to have the right job for volunteers and interns. Awesome. Peer museums, I love that. That's so important to be collaborating. Institutional memory, awesome. Student workers, amazing. I had so many great jobs as a student worker that I take those experience with me. Very cool. Collections, of course, they're at the heart of all of this. That is awesome. Okay, and then the last one is what are 2 to 3 short-term steps that you can take towards achieving your goal? So maybe it's something you already knew, maybe it's something that you're just thinking about now, but what are some things that you could do today, this week, next week to help you achieve your goals or get a little bit closer to those desired outcomes or help you to get over those obstacles that you talked about? So I'm seeing social media, research, planning, mutiny. I hope not. Planning in advance, absolutely. Lots of planning, research, marketing, prioritizing, totally. I used to be what we call in the archives world a loner ranger, where I was the only person who worked in a collection, and it was so hard to prioritize when everything is a priority. So I feel that. Doing an inventory, so important. So much hinges on starting an inventory because it can be a great start for intellectual control. Awesome. Reaching out to partners, reviewing your exhibition policy, totally. Forming a committee, yeah, don't do this on your own. Finding collaborators, amazing. This is fantastic. Thank you, folks, for indulging me. I'm going to go back to my presentation. I will make sure you have those slides. And then as we get to our last 2 slides, I want to invite everybody to use one of these prompts and just share in the chat, just this plain old Zoom chat, something on your to-do list, maybe a reaction about how you're feeling about the planning process, an obstacle you have in mind, a project that you want to complete, something big or small, you can just share in the chat before I bring us to our very last slide to close us out and answer some questions. I would just love to see what folks are thinking because a lot of stuff was thrown at you in this webinar. Requesting loans, scanning images, identifying objects that are conservation priorities, totally. Digitize, 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 yes. Very cool to see what folks are coming up with. Digital exhibit to pair with physical exhibit. Yeah, I love that, Jennifer. I'm just going to bring us to our last slide. I want to thank everybody for joining me. We're coming right up on the hour, but I'm going to hang around to answer some questions. So in our wrap up, I would just like to give folks permission to head out if you need to. I know we're just about at 1:30, but like I said, I'll hang around. I want to invite folks to pop any questions that you might have in the chat. If I don't get a chance to answer every question, you can feel free to email us at info@nedcc.org. Your question will get to me or someone on my team. If you don't have any questions, go ahead and download all the resources that I mentioned, the resource guide, the worksheet, the brainstorming worksheet, the slides, and I will put the recording and the word clouds in there today. And we have an eval in there. If you could fill that out, that really helps us to offer more free webinars. So we would really appreciate it. Thank you again for joining us. I'll turn my camera back on. I just get really distracted seeing myself while I'm presenting, so I like to turn it off. I'm seeing great ideas in the chat. I'm not seeing any questions yet, but like I said, I will hang around to answer questions. Thank you, folks, for coming. This is a really fun webinar to do. Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Anne. Thank you, Janet. I'm not seeing any questions in the chat, but I'll hang around for a few more minutes. And like I said, if you don't have anything in mind now, but you do later, you can always shoot us an email and somebody will get back to you. So a question from Mohammed about cameras to digitize rare documents. That's a very good question. My specialty isn't in digitization, but you could reach out to our digitization. Well, actually, if you email info@nedcc.org, Mohammed, asking about digitization and recommendations, they will get you in touch with our department who does that. And they might have some really good recommendations for cameras specifically for what it is that you're looking for, because that's really the work that they do more so than my team. So go ahead and do that and they'll get you in touch with the right folks. You're welcome. I'm not seeing any more questions in the chat, but I will put email in the chat for anybody who wants to copy it. Info@nedcc.org. It will make sure your question goes to my team or to someone else like the digitization department to get that question answered for you, excuse me. But thank you again for joining us. This is a really fun webinar to do. And hopefully we'll see you back here soon and good luck with all of your celebrations. So thank you so much and I hope you all have a great day.